Welcome. This week we look at one of Caravaggio's most famous work. The Incredulity of St. Thomas. It was made around 1600 in Italy, and as we know, Caravaggio worked in this very innovative way. His new approach to light and contrasts allowed him to produce very theatrical works, and we as viewers almost feel part of the scene here as Jesus says to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and bring your hand and put it into my side. And do not be unbelieving, but believe." So it is a very recognizable subject matter, and the attitudes and gestures of the four characters here are explicit. Unlike in some other Christian works of art, it's actually fairly easy for us as a viewer to identify the scene. The incredulity of St. Thomas is mentioned by St. John in the Sunday Gospel. And Thomas was absent when Christ first appeared to his disciples after his resurrection. And so Thomas would not believe that they had seen the Lord and said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands and put my finger into the nail marks and put my hand into his side, I will not believe," which is St. John chapter 20. And a week later, as Christ appeared to his disciples again, then Thomas placed his finger in the wound of Christ. And so that is exactly what is depicted here. So we see to the left-hand side the risen Christ undoing his white tunic to show Thomas his side's wound, and his head, Christ's head, is largely in a shadow, so it's really accentuating the wounds on his body. And then in the foreground we see Thomas, who's leaning towards Christ's side, examining it in great detail and introducing his pointed finger into the wound. And his other hand rests on his hip, and his face, you can see it, shows this great sort of concentration. And Thomas actually doesn't seem sort of like repelled or squeamish. Rather, he's almost scientifically observing the proof of the resurrection. And then in the background we have the other two apostles, traditionally identified as Peter, depicted as an old man, bald, with grey hair, and then John, the young apostle. And they did not miss Christ's first apparition, yet it seems here in the painting that they welcome the opportunity to see Christ's wounds for themselves. So they too are looking at his body with great attention. And the incredulity of St. Thomas is the main, if not the only, event of the saint's life found in Christian iconography. And the theme has always been popular, and many versions of it can be found in museums or even private collections throughout the world. I have to say, looking at various versions of the subject matter painted by other artists, I have to say we do feel there is something special about Caravaggio's painting of the incredulity of St. Thomas. It's a very engaging picture, and the image is particularly striking, almost shocking, and you as a viewer very much feel part of the scene. Also, there's no indication of the sacred nature of any of the figures, so there's no halo, no gold paint, as often in religious paintings by other artists is the case. The whole scene is very human, very prosaic, and even though we are looking at the figure of the risen Christ, there is no indication of his divine nature, other than his wounds and his apparition. The painter doesn't give a clue as to where the scene takes place, so the figures stand out against this bare, dark background. In terms of light, Jesus and his side seem to be this main source of light. So I have to say also the heads, looking at the heads, they're quite intriguing. They're like united in the quest for truth. and all four characters' attention is drawn towards Christ's side, and so is the viewers. Furthermore, I would even say that the scale of the work, which is close to life size, contributes to engage the viewers, because the figures are exactly life size. You really again sort of like drawn into this picture. This painting must have impressed Caravaggio's contemporaries as much as it impresses us today, as already in the 17th century more than 20 copies were made of the painting. This is the original, the best version, and it belonged to Giustiniani first of all, and now it was then bought by the Russian Royal Collections, and it can be seen in Potsdam at the Sanssouci, which was the summer palace of the King of Prussia, Frederick the Great, which he built in the middle of the 18th century. So thanks very much for watching, and we look forward to welcoming you to next week's video. Thank you.